Hey everybody, Mike Voltinsky again from Aspen Group. I'm here continuing my post regarding making space for Inspiration Journal. It's part of a research program that was between Aspen Group and Barna Group that they were trying to determine why church design matters in ministry. So I did a post to introduce this last week, and now I'm continuing. I'm working my way through the journal. This section is No Place Like Home. So I just want to touch base on this and just share some things that I pulled out of this. And once again, there is 60 pages of data within this journal that I have. And there's three journals, Making Space for Inspiration. The second journal is Making Space for Community. Those two are out now. You can find all of this information at aspengroup.com/ making space. There you'll have access to the journals, you'll have access to the podcast, tons of great information in the podcast as well. They're called Making Space, which I don't know if you could tell. I've got my Making Space sweater on today to inspire me for this post. And it's getting a little cool here in Texas, so I decided to break it out. Okay, so diving in, I just want to point out a couple things that jumped out at me, but as the section, No Place Like Home, starts out, a thought that I want to introduce. Home is more than a space. It's a place deeply ingrained in our emotions and behaviors that speaks to who we are. So the reason that's important is because as they've done this research, they've realized that the things that church leaders care about, things such as faith, discipleship, anxiety, depression, loneliness, they were wanting to know exactly where are people willing to have these conversations at? Why are they not as apt to have these conversations in the church? So where are these places? So that's what this research set out to answer. I'm only going to touch on one of the emotions, loneliness, because I do think that this is something that is pretty prevalent in our society today. Over the last few years, we've been pushed away to our homes, away from our workplaces, and I think there's a loss of fellowship and community, and there's folks that may be feeling loneliness, and we've seen some of the studies that have been communicating that. But the research touches on all U.S. adults, practicing Christians, non-practicing Christians, and non-Christians. And as I pointed out in my first post, I'm focusing on non-practicing Christians and non-Christians because these are the folks that, as a former church leader, obviously want to continue to feed those that are in our churches, but we also want to reach the lost. We want to invite these people that may not be apt to come into a church, so that way we can introduce them to Jesus Christ. So on the topic of loneliness, when asked, where would you be most likely or most willing to have this conversation? I'll give you the top three, and I'll start from the bottom and work my way up because it makes my point. Number three was at a park, which, if you reference last time's post when I spoke, people look at transcendence and tranquil and places of nature fell into that category. Number two, driving in a car. People will be willing to have this conversation driving in a car, hopefully with somebody else, because otherwise you're just driving in a car talking to yourself. But you never know. And number one, in someone's home. So that was the number one reason or the number one place that people would be willing to have this conversation. So how then do we tie uh, individuals being willing to have this conversation in someone's home, but yet we are a church and we're trying to invite people into our church to have these conversations? So when it comes to the need to make space for these things, proximity and access seem to be the major factors in the places people want to be when in certain moods. The research says familiar homes and scenic, quiet places in nature are natural go-to spaces that are consistent, close, open, and available. So that is something to consider when you're thinking about a design. The proximity, the closeness of things. Is it available? Is it open? These are the things that draw people into and create a space to have these conversations. So let me read these two thoughts to you, and I'll close on that. And the next week's post, just to give you a sneak peek as to what I'm going to be talking about, it will be on faith and feelings. So here's what I want to share with you. Churches should be places that welcome people who are emotionally weary. It's something that we're after. Yet, whether because of the environment itself or the community within it, churches fall near the bottom of the list of places people would want to be to process or discuss such emotions. If that is true, if that is the case, if churches are at the bottom of the list, we have to figure out how to redesign our spaces that would be more inviting to draw people into, so we can have this conversation, so we can help them, because that is our ministry. That's what we're after. So here are some of the things to leave you with, and hopefully this stimulates thought. And please know, Aspen Group is here to help talk through whatever challenges you may have as a church. If there's any way we can help design and build for you, please let me know. Rather than attempting to personalize church spaces, pastors can strive to make them personal. That is, a meaningful and memorable expression of what the church is and who God can be for all who enter the building. It's not a style or trend that can make a church feel like home. Home is an expression of the people who occupy it. The church building, therefore, should express the presence of God. As we think about how we design our churches, so that way we can have these challenging, difficult conversations with folks that we can hopefully help them with, we have to think through our space. And one of the things you can do is figure out how to make your church building feel more like home. Thanks for listening. See you next week.